objects here with our code in the background is we can actually just kind of click and drag it in, and that will make something called an IB outlet. So in our case, these are going to be outlets. So just to show you what I mean by that, so I'm just going to grab my hello world label here. And right now I'm going to hold down the control key on the keyboard and click and drag this over. And you'll see a little line is being stretched out. And then you can kind of insert it wherever you need. So I'm just going to drop it, I don't know, right here. So you can see it's going to be a connection outlet. Can't really change it because that's all labels can be. And it tells us what kind of object it is. So it's an interface controller. And let's give it a name. So let's call it outlet hello. And you can see you can change the type here, but because it's a label, we can't really change what type it is. Okay, and then when I click connect, you'll see that it creates a variable. So it gives us this kind of special IB outlet header there. And IB stands for Interface Builder. And what this is doing is this is making the outlet a part of the object's encapsulated data. And basically we're giving it an instance variable here of outlet hello that we can now manipulate however we see fit. And then essentially during initialization, WatchKit is going to take a look at this, create the instance variable, and if we assign it any text, for example, it's going to assign it wherever we need to. So let's bring in all of our variables here, or all of our outlets, I should say. So I'll grab that one. I will grab this one too, put it over there, and this one we'll call outlet, let's just call it my label. Okay, so now we have another one. And this is the type of thing it is. So it's a WK interface label. That's WatchKit interface label. We'll do the same for this one. So bring it over. Okay, and we'll call it outlet my name. Okay, so now we have these three variables that we can kind of play with. And this is how we can kind of set the text and set the other attributes if we need to programmatically. So I'm going to show you one way to do this, so I'm just going to grab one of these variables and I'm going to call set text on it. So I'll do that, let's see here. So when it awakes, so on awake, we want to kind of configure our interface object. So I'm going to put that down below where it calls super.awake. And what we can say is we can just call out the variable. So for example, outlet hello, and we can see that Swift has a lot of autocomplete stuff, which it does for us, which is actually really nice. So if you see, yeah, this is what I want, you just hit tab and it'll fill it out for you. Outlet hello, so that's referencing this variable. And I'm going to say set text. Right? So you can see again, it's kind of auto-completing there. Set text. What do I want the text to be? Well, let's just say this is a test. Okay, so now on awake, it should set the text. So instead of hello world, I'm expecting it to show this is a test instead. So let's test it out. So I'll run the simulator here. Run it, stop the currently running version. And it's compiling. Okay, build succeeded. That's always nice to see. So let's see if it actually works in our simulator. So we'll give it a second here to actually load it up. Okay, there it goes. And hey, there we go. So we can see we kind of overwrote our initial language in there of hello world, and we're just kind of setting the text in this way. Let me get rid of that console. And so this is how we can kind of play with our variables, right? So we send it, it's now an outlet, and basically we'll be doing this a lot. So this is how we can connect our interface, right, our storyboard with our actual code on the other side. So you just kind of control, drag it, and this is perhaps the most simplest thing you can do. It's going to get a lot more complex than that, but in order to actually, connect these two things, you do need to do the control and click and drag. Now, as you can imagine, this set text could be useful if, say, later on we add a button or some other way to change the text. Well, this is one way that we can do it. So we can just say .set text. And because this is a variable, we can kind of reuse this wherever we need to. Let's go ahead and let's get rid of this one, but I do want to kind of change this label, the second one down. So let's say outlet my label .set text. Text will be, I don't know, I'm a label. Okay, and that should work exactly the same. And that's how you can set the text initially programmatically. That's one way anyway. We'll just wait and make sure this loads up correctly. All right, there it goes. and yeah, I'm a label. Another thing we can set programmatically is the color of the outlet. So for example, if we want this label to be a different color instead of just the normal white that it defaults to, we can easily do that. So let's just call the variable again. So outlet my label dot set, and you guessed it, set color. And you can see that it's kind of auto completing for me as well. So let's set the text color. Set text color. There we go. And we can just put in a UI color here. And what that looks like, you can say UI color dot, and then you can set the color here. And you can see it's kind of giving me a whole bunch of options here. So let's see here. Let's go with green, just because it's going to be eye-popping there. Okay, so it's going to set it to UI color dot green once we actually run it in the simulator. Let's test it out though. As usual, we'll just make sure it's working, just as a sanity check. This way we can compile our code and it'll check for errors at that time as well. So there we go, build succeeded. Where's our simulator? There it is. Let's open it up and let's see what it does. Okay, so it should load in a second. And there we go. So now the label color is set to green. Pretty cool. And again, you can imagine how this would be useful. Like later on, maybe we'll add a button, for example, and when the user clicks on it, we'll change the text color. So that's one option. Actually, another neat thing is we can actually put in like a UI color literal here. So if I start to type in, say, for example, color, you see it gives me the option here for UI color literal, and I hit tab, and I can actually just select a color in this way. So kind of a neat little feature here that we can take advantage of. So let's see, let's say I wanted to go with green again. Right, and then you can actually see it right there. And so if we run this, it should work exactly the same, but just kind of convenient to be able to see this now that we can actually just see what the color looks like. So personally, I think that's a pretty neat feature. And of course, we'll just make sure it's working here. All right, there it goes. Yeah, so a little bit different shade of green, but hey, it's working. And this will allow you to be pretty specific with what kind of colors you want. So let's kind of leave that as is. And another thing I wanted to note here before we go any further is if you ever need to delete, say, an outlet here, so a variable, and you need to redo it, for example, you just need to make sure you actually remove the reference to it as well. And what do I mean by that? Well, if I erase this, so you might think this has gotten rid of the outlet, but actually it has not. So if I slide out this panel down here in the bottom left, I can see that there's still a reference to the outlet attached to this label. It's just not connected to anything. And it seems if you look at this little indicator here, it looks like it attached it somehow to this function. So if that is the case with you and you're having problems, just make sure you come in here into the interface controller. You can right click here and you can remove the reference like so. So it's kind of hard to read. Let me expand it out here. But you can see it's referencing, my name is referencing interface controller. And you can actually remove that reference there. And that's going to prevent any bugs you might come across. And so now it's not really connected to anything. It's just kind of a standalone label. So let me pop that back over to the left. And we'll zoom in again here. All right. And so let me bring this back over. So control, bring it here just because. And make sure it's an outlet. And I'm just going to rename it outlet, my name. By the way, I put outlet in front of the variable name here just because I like to kind of indicate what it is. So is it an outlet or is it an action? I like to be able to kind of tell right away what the difference is. Of course, labels, they can't really have actions attached to them, but later on we'll be able to see what that looks like. So bring that over, fix my spacing a bit, and yeah, there we go. So that's how we can set color. Is we can use an attributed string, which is basically a string with some formatting attached. So as you can imagine, that can be pretty useful. So instead of just saying, hey, set text, set color every time, we just pass it an attributed string. So let's take a look at how we would do that. So first of all, let me just kind of reconfigure some of our stuff here. So for now, I'm just going to get rid of this line. And this one I'll leave as is. But Basically, I'm going to be configuring some variables down here, and we'll pass in the attributed string to set attributed string. So instead of set text, we'll say set attributed string. And that's how we can kind of adjust things like the color or the font size, for example. Again, pretty much the things that we are doing, for example, over here, we can do it programmatically instead, like we've been doing. So let's take a look at doing that. So let's make a variable here, and this is going to be a constant. So for constants in Swift, you say let, and we'll say let label attributes equal, give one of these guys, and we're going to say ns. What we want to do is set the color. So we can use our autocomplete here to help us out, right? So we're going to say, okay, well, how do I use the color? If you keep typing, it kind of gives you more suggestions too. So let's see. Okay, so the closest one to match looks like foreground color attribute name. So let's do that. Hit tab to complete that. Foreground color attribute name. And this, I believe, takes a UI color like we did before. UI color dot, hey, let's go with green again. Dot green. Okay, and this warning is just saying, hey, you declared a constant but haven't used it yet. Okay, next let's set our string contents as well. So we'll say let label string equals ns attributed string. That's what we want. Okay, ns attributed string. Here we can pass it the string we want to use. So let's pass it I'm a label. And what attributes do we want to use? Well, we want to use our label attributes that we defined just up here. In fact, let me squish this over a bit more. Okay, so it's a bit easier to see. And then attributes, we just declare. Attributes we want to use, well, use our label attributes. Right, so now we have an attributed string that we can actually just pass into our set attributed string method here. So let's do that. So out of the label, instead of set text, we can say set attributed text. Right? Set attributed text, and as we can see here, based on the type, it's looking for an ns attributed string, which we actually just created. So should be able to just say label string, which we defined here, and not seeing any errors right off the bat. Let's give this a try and let's see if it worked. So we will run it in our simulator. Okay, there it goes, and we'll keep an eye on it here. Build succeeded, awesome. And this should be ready in a second. And by the way, this is just kind of a neat feature that we can use once we can figure out how to label stuff the way we want. And there we go. So it did exactly what we wanted. So this might seem more complex initially, but this is actually really handy to be able to just kind of pass in formatting like this wherever we need to. So basically fully format your string and then you pass it in, and that's going to be pretty convenient. And right now all we did was color and set the string, but we could have done more. In fact, let's go back and let's do some more things, and then we can pass it in to set attributed text. That also means instead of having to manually set it for each label, if we wanted to reuse these attributes for our other labels, well, that would be pretty easy to do. Let's have some more fun with our labels here. So what I want to do is I want to add kind of something that counts whenever we touch the screen, for example. And we can kind of dynamically update our label on the fly that way programmatically. So how are we going to do that? Well, first of all, let's just kind of make it look a little bit nicer. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in some kind of line breaks here. So that is an object we can use. It's called the separator, as you can see down below here. And if you click on these objects, by the way, and give it a second, it'll pop out kind of a description. So here it says separator is a line that visually divides the content of your interface. And hey, that sounds like something I would want. So I'm just going to add one. I'm going to add another right there. Okay, and now our label, as you can see, it's kind of nicely separated from the rest in the middle. And so what I want to do is I'm going to add basically a touch action. And whenever this button is touched, we're going to change whatever text is already in there, and we're just going to kind of increment the counter. So a couple steps I need to do that. First of all, let's add in a touch gesture recognizer, and that is available in our objects library. So if I kind of scroll down, I believe it's near the bottom. Yeah, so tap gesture recognizer. So you can add this, you can add swipe gesture recognizers, long press, all kinds of things really. And so this is going to be useful for us, obviously, when we are developing watch apps. So let me grab this, and I can actually put it right on top of the outlet here. So boom, put it right there. And now I'm going to shrink that over. And now I just need to make sure that I select the touch gesture and add an action to it. Now, how do I do that? You're wondering, well, if I try to do it here and try to bring this over, it's just going to create another outlet for the actual label. And that's not what I want. Now, because they're kind of stacked on top of each other, it just means I have to take this extra step. So I'm going to pop out this guy, and this will show us the interface controller scenes with all like the dependencies. And then what I can do is I can actually just control click here, the tap gesture recognizer. So it's stacked on top of outlet my label, and you can see it kind of expands down to show that. And this kind of shows you how you can do this kind of functionality. So if I control click, grab this, and then I pull it over into our code in the assistant editor, right? So that's how we can kind of bring it over when it's stacked like that. So let's see, it's not going to be an outlet, so this one's going to be an action. So I want it to have some kind of ability to change something. So I'm going to make it an action, and you'll see it's going to create it as a function over in our assistant editor. And let's see, let's give it a name, my gesture, yeah. We'll call it action, my gesture. Okay, we'll connect it. You can see it went IB action, function, action, my gesture. And then this function will be called anytime this gesture is triggered, basically. So anytime I click wherever it is on the screen, it's going to register this function and run the function. And so how can we make a counter? Well, it's pretty straightforward. So first of all, I'll initialize a variable here for our counter starting at 0. And then inside of our function here, well, let's just basically make a set text on this label, and we'll just make sure that we update the counter every time. So despite all the work we did down here, I'm just going to grab this one. So outlet my label dot set text, and we just pass it in a string here. So let's see, we can say tapped. Let's convert our counter into a string here as we're going along, and the way you do that, you can do kind of a backslash, and then you just put in your variable name here. So counter times, so this should tell us how many times it was tapped. Let's test it out, and hopefully this will work. So fingers crossed. And of course, we hope there's no errors in compiling. That's always the number one hope. Build succeeded. Looks okay. And let's test it out. So this popped up automatically, and there it goes. And fingers crossed. So here I go. I'm going to tap with a click. Tap 0 times. Yes, we forgot to put in our logic, of course. So let's put in our logic. So anytime it's tapped, we will just increment the counter plus equal 1 time. Right? And then it's going to be able to be updated here. So of course that makes sense. So we'll stop this and run it again. And theoretically this should work. And counter is just our first example. We'll be able to do other examples later as well. So wait for this to load up. Okay, there it goes. And here we go. Tapped 1 time. There we go. So we can see it's working as intended. So not only are we changing the label, we also saw how we can put in an action that can actually do that for us. So really it's all about playing with the variable and kind of adjusting it however you see fit. So this is a pretty simple example, but it's good in kind of learning how you can adjust our label text, right? It's all kind of about playing with variables, etc., etc. So let's adjust it a little bit, and let's move the tap gesture recognizer. So we'll say, okay, if you click this top separator, it's going to increase. If you click the bottom one, it's going to decrease. Sounds pretty straightforward to me. Let's see if we can just kind of drag this up there. Okay, so we move the tap gesture recognizer now onto the first separator. Let's add another one to the bottom separator. And geez, our screen's getting kind of crowded here. Okay, so we will add another one here. Just make sure that looks okay. Yep. So we'll add another tap gesture recognizer here. We'll stack it on the bottom. And we will basically say the same thing. Well, not the same, but we'll do the opposite here. So we'll bring this guy over, control, bring it here. Okay, this will be action, and we'll call it action. Let's call this one decreaser. Not exactly following a good naming convention, but you know what? For this purpose, it's fine. So we'll say action decreaser, and what are we going to say here? Well, first of all, let's get rid of this guy. Move this over, and we will say counter minus equals 1. And let's just copy this. Paste, set text, tap, counter times. All right, fingers crossed. Let's try this out. Hopefully it works. And not exactly a super good user interface. You know, it wouldn't be clear to the user what happens when you click where. But again, we're just kind of learning here. So this is going to launch. Okay, give that a second. So this should work, just has to be very specific where you're clicking because these separators are so thin. So not something you would really want to do on an actual watch. Let's see if I can find the zone here. Where is it here? There we go, so I hit it. Yeah, so not exactly good user experience, but it is clickable. You just kind of got to be clicking in the right place there. All right, off to a good start. Bit more with labels, and then that's going to pretty much do it for our label videos. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of this label down below, and I'm going to replace it with a couple buttons instead. And those buttons will basically change behavior of one of our labels. So let's get rid of this. In fact, let's pop this thing out, and we'll get rid of the entire outlet. Okay. And make sure we get rid of this one too. Now it's not linked to anything. And okay, so let's move this over, and we'll just view in this view. So let's add in a couple buttons here. So we'll add one, and you can actually adjust the size like so, and we can also say adjust the text inside of it. So let's add one button. Let's add one more, and we'll put it on top. Okay. So these buttons, we can basically use our inspector here to adjust however we need, just like we would any other object. So our attributes, we can change them. So you know what, I'm going to center these buttons, and we'll change the text as well. Now I could change the text programmatically, pretty much just like we did on our labels, but for the purpose of this demo, I'm just going to do it using the inspector here. So first of all, alignment, we'll say center. This button we will also center. And as you can see, button has a lot of the same options that a label would have. So yeah, you just have to make sure that whatever you're doing, that it fits the constraint of the window. Right now, I think it's going to scroll a bit because I think I noticed that it widened out. But you know what? That's okay. So we'll just let it scroll for now. Button, let's see. What do we want our buttons to do? Well, the first thing we can do is we can kind of play with it so it changes the color of a certain item on the screen, for example. Just as a simple example. So let's say we want to adjust the hello world to change color whenever we click on this button versus whenever we click on that button. Well, that's going to be pretty simple. So let's say this one will turn it red. So we'll just say red. This one will turn it green. Okay, and as you can see, you can kind of adjust the content here as well as the color. So maybe we should do like this. Yeah, that'll work. Pretty simple UI, but hey, if it works, it works. Font, I'm pretty okay with that font. Alpha, I think we should leave it as opaque as it is. Here we can adjust kind of the size of the button itself. So if we say relative to the container, you'll see it kind of stretches out, kind of just like a label. So you know what, I kind of like that actually when it stretches out. So we'll say relative to the container. All right, so pretty straightforward buttons. Not too much else to do to it. Height is pretty okay in my opinion. So let's go ahead and let's link this to our code, and let's add some behavior to it. It's going to be pretty straightforward, not too different from what we've seen previously, but let's just do it anyway. And you know what else? I'm going to get rid of these tap gestures because I don't think we really need them at this point. It's kind of cluttering up our code. So let's see here. Let's get rid of these two actions and the counter. We don't really need it anymore. Okay. So let's grab our buttons. Let's give them behavior, and then let's see if it works. So let's see here. We'll do it up here. This one we will control click, and grab it over. Okay, this one will be in action as well. So action red button. Red button. Okay. So that's our action red button. We'll just do this one at the same time. Bring it up here. Action green button. Okay, and you can probably imagine how this is going to go. So let's see how we can kind of mutate or change this string. Well, it's quite straightforward actually. So we just say outlet hello, that's the one I'm going to target, dot set text color. And the color, it takes a UI color, so we'll say UI color dot, well this one is our red button, so we'll say red. Okay, and that's our action red button. Oh, it looks like I made this one an outlet instead of an action. So let's fix that. So let me just kind of get rid of that. Delete. Okay, get rid of this guy. And let's try that again. So click, bring it over. This one will be an action. So action green button. Okay, and we'll kind of do the same thing. So we'll just copy this and we'll change the color. Paste color dot green. Okay, so theoretically this should work. Let's move this back over. Let's take a quick look at what we're doing. All right, so this button has an action associated with it that's going to set the color to red of this label. This one will set it to green. Let's try it out though. So we'll run the simulator. Alright, and we will wait for it to compile, and then we'll check that our app is working. Okay, there it goes. Okay, yeah, so we can scroll, but let's try it. So red, green, red, green, red, green. Cool. So, I mean, it's looking pretty simplistic, but hey, at least we have some functionality now. And then if we wanted to, we could kind of mutate the string in a different way. We could do it kind of a more complex way by setting a set attributed string text. But for this purpose, this definitely works as intended. So when you consider a watch, you're probably going to want to have big buttons that do straightforward things. In our case, you know, this is a pretty simple example, but hey, it works.